And I want to bring in my man, Lee Camp. Lee Camp, he is part, or at the very least, his new show, Redacted Tonight, that is going to be premiering today. Lee, welcome to the show, man. How you doing? You doing all right?
I'm doing good. Actually, I'm calling it unredacted tonight. So
Unredacted Tonight. What did I call it? Unredacted Tonight. Thank you.
The original was Redacted Tonight, which ran for 8 years. People are probably familiar with that, and it's been gone for 3 years, as you know, and I'm bringing back a version of it. So.
Well, badass. Definitely check Lee out with that show. He is an American stand-up comedian, actor, writer, and activist. And his show will be tonight. I'm glad you could join me, man. You doing all right?
Yeah, I'm doing all right, hanging in there and all the suppression and shit show we're seeing. Yeah.
Well, the suppression and stuff, maybe if not coming to an end, maybe curbed. Especially with the negotiations that are taking place. Give me your take on this. Like you said, you worked on the network for a bit. How do you view the conversation that's taking place between Moscow and the U.S. now in order to resume diplomatic relations in the war in Ukraine and to restore normalization of relations between the United States and Russia? What are your thoughts on this, just as stepping into it?
Well, first of all, just from taking a step back and looking at it, world leaders should always be speaking to each other. This whole idea of I'm not talking to you because I'm angry with you is just, it's childish and it's idiocy. And I think the real reason that the U.S. empire under Biden, but a lot of the efforts to create this proxy war were going on under Trump, whether he knew it or not. But a lot of what the reason that they never wanted to speak to Putin is because they knew they wanted the proxy war. Like the ruling elite in America wanted the proxy war. And so talking to Putin did nothing because they just wanted to keep it going. Whereas, there's a lot of awful stuff to say about Trump, and I've probably said it all. I am no Trump fan, but there are certain areas where he is right. And the neoliberal, let's create war around the world and put us at the brink of nuclear war is wrong. And this is one of them. And there should be no proxy war in Ukraine. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians should not be dead right now. And believe it or not, in a matter of weeks, there's a million other things awful he's done, but in a matter of weeks, he has taken us significantly back from the brink of nuclear war.
Yes, agreed. 1,000% agreed. It is coming out right now, and this is funny to me. Trump has been bashing Zelensky. He has been putting a knife in him. And one of the clips came out where he called him a dictator and everything else. Zelensky has apparently killed Truth Social in Ukraine. Right here. This is fascinating to me. The balls on him for doing this. This is not going to turn out well for him. I'll just say it that way. But Truth Social is currently unavailable in Ukraine. And apparently many Ukrainians are pointing out that they don't have access to it. Give me your take on that. Trump is not going to tolerate this. J.D. Vance put out his own message effectively saying, don't bite the hand that feeds you. This is definitely biting the hand that feeds him. He's in a pissing match with Donald Trump when Donald Trump is effectively ending the war.
True. I would say making Truth Social unavailable somewhere is kind of like walling off part of Antarctica. No one was there to begin with.
Right. Nobody's there, right? Nobody's there. But it is the president's account.
Yeah. It was his thing, and I'm sure Trump is pissed, and it's not going to end well for him. But hilariously, this is a U.S. puppet. Zelensky was put into place by powerful interests in Britain and the United States to create a proxy war or something similar. And that is where it's led. And he is out on a limb here. No matter how this ended, it was not going to end well for Zelensky. I mean, it might end in a Gaddafi fashion, or it might end with him going and living in his mansion in, Rio or something. But it's not gonna end with him, continuing to be president. And he has put himself on a limb with the U.S. empire, where it's just like, unless we keep going down this path of having giant missiles at his back, ready to fire into Russia, there's no other option.
Well, Trump is continuously talking about elections. And one of the other interesting parts, Kellogg, people initially in the beginning, people like me were like, oh my God, Kellogg is saying something different than what Trump wants. Fast forward, we find out that Kellogg's job was effectively to just babysit Europe and to hear all of the complaints that are coming out of Europe while the adults in the conflict and reshape the world based upon Trump's idea of what that world should look like in a geopolitical sense. This is Kellogg. And the reason why I'm playing this clip is because it's clear at this point that this idea that Zelensky gets the ear of the president is off the table. He has been relegated to having conversations
to the kids' table.
He's been relegated to the kids' table. So this is Kellogg, I guess, making that point clear.
Good. Well, look, it's good to be back in Kyiv again. To have some wonderful talks with President Zelensky and staff and military commanders. It's kind of nice that I'm here just a few days before the third anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Gives a chance to have a good substantial talks. We had a chance to see President Zelensky and his team down in Munich.
Basically, we had the chance to have talks with Zelensky. These are going to be central talks. While I'm here in Munich having these talks, as Marco Rubio, Wysikoff, Hegseth was in Munich. But basically, while these people negotiate, I am going to have talks with Zelensky. Meaning, it's not Trump having talks with Zelensky. It's Kellogg. He is at the kids' table, as you point out. He is having that. This is fascinating to me. Like, the world has fundamentally shifted within a very few days. And I don't necessarily entirely know where to place it, but it seems like Trump is serious about ending this war and has taken a blowtorch to Zelensky in his framing of events to do it. This is Trump talking about Zelensky having a 4% approval rating in Ukraine, and that they need to have elections. Effectively, we need to get rid of the guy that is the impediment to peace in Ukraine.
Well, Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It's been a long time since we've.
Well, I was just gonna play the clip, but go for it. I played this clip to the audience before, so the audience doesn't really need to see the clip again. Give me your take on that.
I was just gonna say, Trump takes the veil or the mask off of a lot of the behaviors of the ruling elite in the U.S., the U.S. empire. And one of the facts he's revealing is Zelensky has never mattered. Zelensky has been a placeholder. The U.S. has told him how to behave, and he's been doing it. But now Trump is going the opposite direction, and Zelensky still doesn't matter. But now it's not the direction Zelensky wants to go. But he's never mattered. If you look at in that first month, when Russia invaded Ukraine, but we know the proxy war started long before that. But if you look at that first month, there was a peace deal on the table. I'm sure you've talked about it many times that was going to be signed. And that was where Zelensky was headed. He was headed to sign something that would stop Russia from destroying his country. And Boris Johnson and the U.S. come in and say, no, you're not allowed to have peace. We're not going to back you if you sign that agreement. And they just tear it up. And it's been in that position ever since. And so Zelensky didn't matter 1 month in, and he doesn't matter now. It's just that Trump is publicly saying he doesn't matter, which is not the story that the U.S. wanted to tell the world until now. So that's really the biggest difference. One other kind of deeper point I want to make is this is a bit of good cop, bad cop from the United States, even though I know liberals hate what Trump's doing. But it's basically like bad cop was Biden and the U.S. creating just straight up war in Ukraine. Good cop against Russia in order. And their aim was to separate Russia from Europe, one of the biggest ones. But they also want to separate Russia from China. The first one worked. The second one very much did not work. Now you have good cop going in and saying, I'm no longer going to create war with you in Ukraine. And in return, and I'm sure this is in the negotiations, although Putin's not going to do it, in return, I want you to align more with us and stop aligning with China. Work economically with the U.S., don't work with China. Putin's not going to do it because he's not an idiot. He knows how the U.S. behaves. Every other year we change our mind or we use something as a trick. So I would be seriously surprised if it worked, but it's the same aim. The aim has not changed. It's just whether we're murdering Ukrainians that's changed.
Yes. Oh, really good point. Speaking about the election thing in Ukraine, and speaking about that, this is Trump once again going after Zelensky. And the reason why I'm showing this is because I want to show another article that came out of the Independent that has a fascinating title that is just mind blowing. But this is Trump talking about doubling down on Zelensky.
He refuses to have elections. It's low in the real Ukrainian polls. I mean, how can you be high with every city is being demolished? It's hard to be high. Somebody said, oh, no, his polls are good. Give me a break. Every city is being demolished. They look like a demolition site, every single one of them. And the only thing he was really good at was playing Joe Biden like a fiddle. He played him like a fiddle. That's an expression we use, yes, sir, to say that he's pretty easy, pretty easy. A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast because that war is going in the wrong direction. In the meantime, we're successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia, something I'll admit that only Trump is going to be able to do in the Trump administration. We're going to be able to do it. I think Putin even admitted that.
The way he talks is utterly hilarious to me.
I love that Trump now seems bored by his own garbage. Like he used to deliver that with such energy. Oh, no one can do it but Trump. Now he's like, no one can do it but Trump.
Well, you said the same thing for like several months or like a year. You might get tired of saying it. Here's the article that came out from this. So it says there are concerns that the Ukrainian president could be voted out of office if the country holds elections. Okay, well, it's an election. It's like it's an election. Yeah, you may be voted out of office in an election because it's an election. That's the entire point of it. It's hilarious to me that they are screaming at the top of their lungs, oh my God, I can't believe that Donald Trump is accusing Ukraine, or for that matter, Europe, of starting the war. And I'm like, but they did start the war. Like, they did blow off elections. They did blow off the Minsk agreements. They did blow off any notion of fair representation of East Ukraine all of that's true. And we had elections during the Civil War. Why can't they? Zelensky is using this idea of, well, the Russians want it, and because the Russians want it, that's enough of a reason for me not to hold elections. Okay, dude, you're missing the point. You're missing the point.
Well, and I'm sure he's been advised by the U.S. back under the Biden administration not to have elections. And the reason the U.S. didn't want him to is because they feared that a non-puppet gets in power.
Yes.
They don't want a non-puppet in there.
Yeah, they don't want a non-puppet in the race. So true. From your take on this, you're looking at this, he seems serious about wanting to put an end to this conflict. Europe is freaking out. Zelensky is freaking out. The elites in DC, let's say Democrats, are freaking out. Do you think he's going to be ultimately get what he wants out of this? That a president by himself has the capability of doing this?
Yeah, I'd say, sometimes we overestimate the power of the president in our system, but this is one area where absolutely the president can go to a country and now, whether he can deliver on all of his promises to that country, that's another question. But he can generally strike a deal to end a proxy war that has been recreated and furthered by the U.S. Yeah. And, Putin's stipulations are probably going to be some amount of land. It's probably, Ukraine can never join NATO, which they also have said, Hegseth and others have said they're dropping. It's probably that the CIA needs to get the hell out of Ukraine because even New York Times has admitted the CIA was training and arming Ukrainians as early as 2014, which does not sound like a non-war to me. Could he achieve this? I think he'll absolutely achieve this, ending this proxy war. But the reason it's going to be so easy for him to achieve is because the proxy war the entire time has been a U.S. creation. So right. The U.S. can easily stop something that it created and funded and armed. If this were a war between Russia and some other country, had nothing to do with the U.S., it'd be a lot harder for the U.S. to go in and stop it because it wasn't about our interests. But since the U.S. created this thing, yeah, they can stop it.
From as you're looking at your show is going to be tonight, what is the main topic that you see as, let's say, big that has not necessarily been talked about with this changeover in the administration?
Well, that's a good question. I'm spending the first 10 minutes of the show tonight. By the way, it'll premiere at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific on my YouTube, youtube.com/@realleecamp, and also on my rumble.com/leecamp. But yeah, I'm spending the first like half of the show on, I call them the real owners of the world. And these are these giant shadow banks. People are starting to know some of their names, but BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street are some of the biggest ones. And BlackRock has over $10 trillion in its coffers. And where it invests that money is where the world, or at least the Western world, goes. So they invest in big oil, deforestation, all the media companies, all the big pharma companies, all the big ag companies, basically everything that is running and pivotal in our inverted totalitarian corporate-led world. They are the funding behind it and the investment behind it. And if they were to change their mind and go another way, let's say, for one thing, I give the example on the show of they are investing in big plastics. Dow Chemical makes a lot of plastics, and we're suffocating the world in plastics. And if they were to say, we're pulling all of our money, trillions of dollars out of plastics, and we're putting it into biodegradable plastics, well, that's where the industry would go. Or, they now have plastic substances that are made out of mushrooms and biodegrade quickly and that type of thing. That's where the industry would go. And it's the same with fossil fuels. It's the same with weapons contractors. They, in that way, control the world, control where the empire goes. And they're hardly ever talked about. Yeah. They get less media coverage than a Native American protesting the petrodollar. I mean, it's never mentioned. So it's amazing that we never mention kind of the most powerful entities in the Western world.
Well, I mean, those companies are only going to go in the direction of how do they maximize profit. They don't really care about anything else short of that. I mean, everything is subordinate to, all right, if we can make more money doing mushrooms and turning those into plastics, then that's what they do.
Yeah. Because
it's cheaper, I would imagine, to use whatever synthesis they're using to make the plastics. They're just going that direction. Like, I don't know if there's an intellectual capacity to it beyond where's the profit and how can we make as much as possible.
I don't think there is. And the best example of that was a few years ago when there was a push, one of the many pushes to end fossil fuels. BlackRock made a statement about, we're going to pivot away from fossil fuels or something like that. And they are one of the biggest investors in oil, but also in this Texas oil company. And, so some of these oil companies and oil executives, oil investors started freaking out. Oh my God, BlackRock's moving their funds or whatever. And so the head of BlackRock then came out and made a statement and said, never mind, basically we said that, but we're not really doing that. Like they basically said, we're going to pivot away from fossil fuels because it looked good to say that, but they never actually moved any of their money. It's just profit. They're going towards oil, and that's where the profit is. It's also, oil is pivotal to the U.S. control of the world, U.S. hegemony. And so, of course, they're keeping their money in oil.
That brings up the other issue of DOGE, right? Because it goes and falls into this kind of oligarchy thing that I would argue we were oligarchy before Trump took over. It seems like some people are now recognizing it, looking at you, Sanders, now that the Democratic Party is out of office.
Yeah.
They are going to fleece this government. The tax cuts are going to be astonishing. And those tax cuts will go through. Yeah, for the rich. And they'll go through. Give me your take on DOGE. Because on its face, I don't think most Americans take issue with, let's say, an analysis of how money is being spent. The reality of it, though, is that this is not going to be to the betterment of the American public. It's not going to be to the betterment of the American worker. It's certainly not going to be to the benefit of the poor. They are talking about destroying various departments, like the Department of Education. I believe the Department of Energy is being touched. They are also, interestingly enough, going into the Department of Defense. Thank you on that one. Give me your take on this, on DOGE, and how that's functioning in our system?
Well, I have a nuanced view that I think pisses off both sides, which is
Go for it. Oh, those are the best. Those are the best.
Seems to be my my MO on a lot of things. Well, let's be clear on the aim of DOGE and Elon Musk and the others. It is to gut the things in government that are kind of barely still functioning to help the American worker and the American people. It doesn't, I think, at the end of the day, have almost anything to do with saving money. I mean, they don't actually care about whether money's saved, except that they can maybe go, it maybe looks like good PR to say we'll give a big tax cut to the rich because we saved all this money from the government.
Right.
But they don't actually care about saving money.
By the way, that is what they're saying. They're saying that they're mitigating the cost of the tax cuts with savings through organizations like DOGE. That is their argument.
And then if you look at the list of the things they're crushing and gutting, some of the ones that the liberal media are, and I, you know, there's a non-liberal media that actually gets more views, like Fox News, but the liberal media, some of the things that they're freaking out the most about, like USAID. I support crushing USAID because it's been used as a U.S. empire coup factory for generations. And, you know, we found out just the other day that USAID funds something like 6,000 journalists around the world to put out pro-U.S. propaganda. So, I mean, you couldn't even begin to name the number of coups around the world that USAID has played some role in, either via grants or media or propaganda, et cetera, et cetera. So, I do not have a problem with that. And, you know, that's one of the biggest things liberals pointed to, just to, oh my God, look at what they're doing. Another one that well, I was gonna say, then some of the other ones that people are freaking out about, it's kind of like they weren't hardly doing anything to begin with. So they're crushing the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Now, why are they doing that? They're doing that because they don't care about average Americans. They don't want to protect you. Why would they ever care about that? But the reason it doesn't bug me that much is because the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau had been defanged. It had very little power. It was hardly doing anything for the American people. I think one of the biggest things they brag about is ending nitpicky fees from banks. But it's like, so basically you ended nitpicky fees so the banks can just continue exploiting us full tilt. But yeah, it's not, you don't have to pay the $5 fee. Like to me, it's a Band-Aid. A lot of what they're gutting were these little Band-Aids that are designed to actually make Americans not realize what's going on. Oh, the banks aren't exploiting you. We got rid of that $5 fee. Of course they're still exploiting us. So there's those things. Now, there are other things they are gutting or aiming to gut that could be very influential, such as the Department of Education and the FAA as these planes are falling out of the sky. And so there are other areas that are a big deal. And again, this is Trump and Musk and other ruling elite. Just they're trying to take off the final little bit. I mean, there's not much to take off, but these final little bit of safeguards to stop full-on corporatocracy, totalitarianism. And these safeguards were barely even there. They're just ripping off the Band-Aids on gaping wounds. And, you know, I think it could harm a lot of people depending on where they keep angling it all. But I'm not crying for the few thousand CIA workers that took Trump's offer to leave the CIA. Like, oh no.
That part is fascinating to me, because like usually intelligence is a sacred pony of both the right and the left. It is not a sacred pony to Trump.
Well, like no, he just wants his CIA.
Yeah. Yes.
He's not getting rid of intelligence agents. He just wants his people.
Yes. I think that's the true part, right? It's like all of these people who came after me, they're fair game. Whether they were in the FBI, whether they're in the CIA, I want them gone. Fair game. Lefties, real lefties, look at that and says, yes, good. They have zero issue with him doing that. But then they move into the Department of Education, the Department of Energy, the FAA, like you said, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And so it's kind of like a mixed bag. They are preserving nobody which again gives you the mixed bag stuff. I'm fascinated by it. And again, for the American public who's not entirely paying attention, and they just hear there's all of this waste, fraud, and abuse that we are now getting rid of. And the American public says, great. What they don't get, as you pointed out, is that it's also going after things like Medicaid.
Yeah. Social Security. Yeah.
Social Security. Well, we don't know about Social Security yet. I mean,
well, they had a hearing where they were basically starting to go after Social Security. And I played a clip the other day where one of the Democratic senators was correctly saying, you know how much Elon Musk gets from the government per day? $8 million. And you're going after the $65 the grandma gets. Like,
and that's the point that Sanders made. Because when Sanders was on, I believe it was CNN, and then she was like, well, they said that $8 million or whatever that number was going out in fraud. And Sanders was looking at her like, are you seriously talking to me about $8 million? Do you know how much Social Security is? Or do you know how much Medicaid is? We're talking about, like, let's say an $800 billion thing. And you're talking to me about like $8 million. This is nonsense. They're trying to privatize Social Security. He's right. They, like, everything that they're doing, like, Republicans hate government services. And so things like Social Security, Medicare, I don't know why anybody would trust those services with an organization and a group that hates those services and want to privatize those benefits from our government. As you say, there are very few benefits that we get. They're trying to get rid of it. Is that the way you take that? I mean, that's the way I look at it anyway.
Yeah, no, it is. And you know, a lot of these things came into creation. They were birthed during the New Deal, during FDR.
Yes.
FDR was pressed and able to do these things because of a strong labor movement that basically made corporate America, which still even owned the presidency back then, made corporate America scared enough that the workers might really rise up, that they were willing to give some allowances like Social Security and Medicare and various other things, worker protections and stuff, in order to basically save capitalism. At that time, they were afraid capitalism would lose to communism around the world. And you had a lot of people in America, a lot of workers going, why am I, defending this system when over there the workers run things?
Right.
And so you had this kind of, back then, you had this huge entity that was made all the capitalists, the true capital power brokers, afraid that they had to give these caveats and these allowances to workers. Now that we've, crushed the Soviet Union and everything else, these corporate entities are not really afraid of that. And they're just trying to destroy workers as much as they can. In Utah, they just passed and signed a bill making unions essentially illegal, at least with federal contracts. So we're seeing that a lot of other, outside of Trump, a lot of other, state entities, et cetera, are feeling empowered to crush the remnants of, the labor movement. There's only 7 to 10% of American workers are in unions anymore, and they want to crush that. That's too much for them.
Do you see a renewal? I don't see it. Hakeem Jeffries, I've titled the video "Hakeem Jeffries is trash." I'll stand by that. I don't see a recognition, a come to Jesus. I don't see any of that. Do you see a renewal to that process? Meaning a backlash
by the Democrats?
Yeah. Do you see or because I think you're right. It was the fact that the labor movement was strong, that the labor movement had influence in regards to the Democratic Party. That doesn't seem to be the case today. I had a friend of mine who was part of a union. And I remember I pointed out, I was like, but the Democrats don't seem to back you. And he says, well, yeah, but Republicans hate us. And so we're in this position where we can't say anything about Democrats because the opposition hates us. And so we're in this kind of box where we can never grow. We're always just kind of this kind of attrited away. That was his take on it. And so it was like, okay, unions can't even point out that the party that's supposed to represent them don't. That sucks. That's a horrible position to be in. And yet that seems to be the position that they were in. That's the position that he articulated. Do you think that there's going to be this kind of backlash? Right now, in the election that just recently took place, Trump won union voters. He won at the very least, Teamsters. I mean, they wouldn't even give their, what did they call it? They don't even give their support to Kamala Harris in that, because the majority of them went with Trump. If you look at the election results, it was the same thing in the polling. The majority of workers went with the Republicans. Elites went with Democrats. The poor went with Democrats. Do you think that a backlash is going to take place that reinvigorates that? Because if not, oh God.
Yeah, but I think the only backlash that could really matter is a backlash that drives outside of the two parties that are sending us off the same cliff.
Yeah.
So if the backlash, like, I'm happy to see protests in the streets today and yesterday and the day before, but if those protests are just get rid of Trump, then people still don't understand the system at play. Most of what, and I failed to mention this earlier, most of what Trump is able to do right now is at least partially thanks to previous Democratic presidents that have taken power, that have made the unitary executive more and more powerful. And at no point, sometimes they would get really upset about these things, right? When George W. Bush was in office, Democrats said, oh my God, he's taking all this power for himself. He's acting like he's a dictator, all this stuff. And then when Obama gets into office, nothing changes. They don't give any power back. Like when the Democrats got into office after Bush, they didn't say, oh, now we're ending unlimited surveillance of American citizens. No, every power they take is kept. And so the Democrats open this door for everything Trump is doing. And I think the only pushback that'll ultimately matter long term is pushback that says, oh, both these corporate parties don't care about us. They care about profit. They care about corporate totalitarianism. And we have to get outside of this. And we need to fight for things that are not just electoralism. We need to fight for changes much larger than once every 4 years, pushing a button on a screen that may not actually record your vote. It's just honestly, like it's gotten to the point when you have Congress and the president not listening to Americans at all. What we actually want gets done 0% of the time. You combine that with the fact that we can't actually see inside the computer voting systems and don't actually know what's going on. You might as well sit home on your couch and just push a button in the air, because it's equally influential. So the protests need to be about changing the systems. The systems need to change. We need to get outside of the capitalist destruction of the world, and it can't be done with these two garbage parties.
No, man, I agree with you. I guess my thing is I don't see a change. I don't see around the corner. I don't see that movement taking place.
I mean, part of it has to do with people are misled. So many people do not. I mean, you have people chanting in the street for USAID because they don't understand what it is. So many people are propagandized that they're completely confused, which is it's a psyop. It's by design. So I think you combine that with the fact that most people are just struggling to get by. They don't have time to educate themselves on this stuff, and they don't have time to get out on the streets. They don't have time to do anything other than work their two jobs and try and take care of their kids. So those two things work together perfectly to allow a capitalist exploitation of all of us.
Lee, man, always appreciate you joining me. Always appreciate talking to you. It's been a while since I've had the opportunity to talk to you, so I'm glad that you're doing well. I am glad that your show is coming back tonight, Redacted tonight. Check him out at 7 p.m. on his YouTube channel, The Real Lee Camp. By the way, it is possible that with the normalization of relationships between, well, I guess this one doesn't matter. Both of us, on some level, lost our jobs. Well, I did anyway, because of the sanctions that the Biden administration passed. Do you think with the normalization of relations that RT and Sputnik are coming back to the U.S.?
I would say highly unlikely, because because I mean, look, if you're hoping for that, I don't want to throw cold water on it.
No, I got to be honest with you. My take on it is interesting. I hate the fact that all of these people lost their jobs. From my take, I just want the war to stop. Even if I don't get anything out of it, I want it to stop. By the same token, I hate this idea that all of these people lost their jobs for nothing. I mean, like, if you get a situation where, okay, October 15th was the last day the Sputnik operated. And then 3-4 months later, you get a situation where, okay, now we've normalized relations with Russia. And it's like, okay, what the hell? So these people lost their jobs for no reason.
Well, let me just give a slightly different view, because I guess it was a little different for Sputnik and for RT America. Sputnik continued until, like you said, just a few months ago, really.
Yeah.
Whereas RT America fully shut down 3 years ago. But even before that, and I'm sure Sputnik saw some changes, but before that, 2016 was really the big change, where RT America's videos were suppressed into almost oblivion. I'm not privy to any of the talks, but I know that RT America was forced to meet with the Justice Department. That's when they essentially sold. It basically became a separate company from RT, and it was called TNR, and that was kind of forced, or at least pressured, by the Justice Department to be this separate entity. And it really was like, this was all under Trump. The Justice Department made it so that they could pull the plug on RT America at any moment they wanted to. And then they ultimately did that under Biden, but all the pieces were put in place under Trump. I mean, RT America went from a very widely watched TV channel to, very hard to find in the corners of the internet. And that was all under Trump. So I don't know. I could be wrong, but
we'll see. We'll see how it works. Fingers crossed. I want those people to get their jobs back. I don't know about RT.
There's so many amazing, that's the saddest part. There's so many amazing creators and speakers that were on those channels, Chris Hedges and Jesse Ventura and Abby Martin, and so many of these awesome people in your show, and
Manila Chan.
Manila Chan. And I wish all those people were seen by millions of people, because they need to be. But I'd say that's the saddest part. Just before I run off, I just want to give people a way to find the show tonight. Probably the easiest thing to do is just go to my Linktree, because that's easy not to forget. Linktree.com/Lee Camp. That's got all my links there of everything you need to find, YouTube, Rumble, everything. But it'll premiere at 7 p.m. It'll be a weekly show. It's very much in the same vein as Redacted Tonight, except it's called Unredacted Tonight. And it is it's independent, not connected to RT.
Of course.
People will notice it is smaller budget, but I hope they very much see that it is essentially the same ideas, the same comedy, and the same host. So,
and just be clear, completely independent. My channel, your channel, all these channels, completely independent. Just curious on your take, because you were there during the storm when all this stuff was happening. Man, thank you for this, Lee. You have a good one, man. Be safe.
Thank you. You too, man.
All right, Lee Camp. Shout out to him. Let's go to chat just for a bit before we close. Lucky Lou. Let's see. Ron Hazelton loved RT. It was good. It was a good channel. You used to get content that you wouldn't necessarily get coming out of U.S. media. And again, we have been more accurate on this stuff. So what is this? Spiker Hand. John Clayton was not a Democrat. What is that? Not a Smokey, and the fire is coming. We'll see. I don't see a change. I don't see any political coalition that is challenging Trump. Trump seems to be strode the globe as a Galactus at this point. But we'll see. They're going to fleece America, though. Let's be very clear. Sid Precious, watch the UK, see how you guys will end up in 5 years. Okay, we'll see. I guess we can do it. True story, Linda, our politicians and our media excel at divide and conquer, distraction, fear, and loathing, and ripping the U.S. off blind. Yes. 1,000% agree. Craig Waffle, thanks, Lee. Shout out to Lee. Method, get rid of artists, writers, musicians, etc. FF, for fuck's sake. Fair enough. My favorite planet, Jamal and Lee. Shout out to Lee. Shout out to him indeed. All right. We have come to the end. I want to thank all of you for joining me. I want to thank all of my guests, Lee, Garland, Andre. Shout out to all of you. Much appreciated. Give the show a like if you indeed are digging what is being put down. Share the content. You can always support this content through PayPal, Patreon, Super Chats, memberships. All Super Chats will be read, providing they're not racist, sexist, or bigoted. And all members, thank you. You make this content what it is. I deeply appreciate you for doing so. Most of these shows are demonetized. So at least most of them happen. It sometimes depends on the title, depends on how YouTube looks at it after. But you ultimately pay for this content. You support this content, and I thank you for it. I'm going to sign off. You all have a fantastic day, and I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning. Jamal Thomas Morning Show. Signing off. Have a good one all.